Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We had tons of energy and something to prove, and we pulled it off and were proud of it. It was hunger, I concluded. Even more than ability, that was essential for success. This is essentially how a loss making Star TV was transformed into this billion-dollar enterprise, and it continues to rule India. And this is just a glimpse into this wonderful book written by someone called Peter Mukerjea, but you know him as Peter Mukerjea. So that's how you know him better. This famous, very successful TV executive everybody knows about. And he's written this, as I said, absolutely fascinating book, which we're going to launch in this episode of Soft Cover, which is the Print's platform to launch books. So let's begin by unveiling the book first. I didn't want to say the name till I actually unveiled it. Here it is, Starstruck, Confessions of a TV Executive. It's a sleek looking book, but an even better book to read. I was mesmerized, Mr. Mukerjea, reading the book. It gave me such deep insights into this world that not many of us know a lot about. So thank you so much for being on Soft Cover. Congratulations for this wonderful book. This is a Westland publication. Let me begin by asking you, I know the entire book is about that, but just very, very in 2 lines, if you had to put it, how did you manage this? How did Star TV become what it did under you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I think it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for unwrapping the book in a new novel kind of way, no pun intended. But I think it really is an honor to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. So in response to your question, in 2 lines, it's impossible, firstly, to do it in 2 lines. So I think it's going to be a little bit longer than that.
Sure. Please.
In reality, it's I just happen to be at the right place at the right time. As quite honestly, it was a effort by an awful lot of people. A combined effort. It always takes teamwork, and at the start of that journey, I think the composition of the team was absolutely essential, and getting the right ingredients. So it's like anything that you look to kind of create, you need all the different ingredients to come together at the right time, in the right way. And I think from my point of view, this could not have happened had it not been for literally everybody that worked at the company at that time to kind of, hold each other's hand, support each other, and above all, trust each other to just see where we go with this. We did not know at any point in time that this was going to be, the success that it did become, and whether we were going to kind of score as many goals as we did. But thankfully, it worked out, and I believe there is a God, and there is a certain amount of good luck and good fortune in all of this, and that's what made the results come through.
Right. So, you've mentioned something very interesting in your book, that you wanted Star TV to become an employer of choice. And I think that's something very wonderful. That's an interesting thought. That's not what many employers really think. How did you go about doing that, and how important do you think that was in making Star TV what it became?
Well, look, employer of choice is an interesting phrase because, as I say, it was more to do with getting the right people and therefore the right ingredients. The fact that we wanted to be an employer of choice. Employer is a little kind of it's a sort of strange word because it combines a whole bunch of things. So you're employing people, you pay them a salary, and they're contracted in a manner of speaking to working a certain number of hours in the day, certain number of days in the week, and so on and so forth. But I think in this particular situation, whilst we wanted to be employer of choice in the marketplace, um, I never really saw it as being an employer to an employee. I was an employee myself, but the freedom that I was given to be able to hire the people that I thought would be the right people for the job, and the kind of conditions of employment, the compensation, the quality of people, the nature of people, the personality of people was, just as important as their, let's say, professional qualifications, right? And so, from our point of view, as in an employer at that time, or as in a team building exercise, we wanted to have people that really fitted the kind of thought processes that we had at that time.
Right.
So yeah, we wanted to be an employer of choice, given the the competitive framework that existed in the marketplace. We could see weaknesses there, and we wanted to make sure that what we had and what we were able to offer, was able to overcome those kind of weaknesses for ourselves. There were a number of very interesting instances, and I think I've kind of touched on one or two of those in the book, where I literally had to speak to the parents of some of the young kids who were coming to join us at that time, because their parents were nervous about their children working in media, B, in television. And so, quite often they'd say, listen, my parents are not very happy. I really want to come and work here, but they'd rather have me work in a bank or, somewhere else. And will you please speak to them? And I thought that was an interesting kind of situation for me to find myself. And I think I must have had at least 3 or 4, if not more, instances that I had to speak to somebody's mom or somebody's dad and try and kind of persuade them that, their child was making the right decision and they weren't, joining some sort of tin pot company.
Right. In your book, you've talked about several challenges about building Star TV in India. But if I were to ask you, what was the bigger challenge? Was it managing to cater to the Indian audiences, the content, transition from English shows to Hindi shows, or was it getting advertisers and advertising revenue?
Well, it's a very good question. And to be honest with you, I think it's a combination of both. One could not work without the other. We had to get, content on air that looked great, that was great in terms of its scripting and its storytelling. At the same time, it needed to be technically and visually superior to whatever else was available on other channels at that time, whether it was the sound quality or whether it was the lighting or whether it was the length of the commercial breaks, the graphics. Overall on-air presentation was, as critical as the content itself. So there really was, a combination of those two key ingredients. When you have that level of attention to detail going into what I would call on-air presentation, then the commercial breaks and the kind of commercials that go on air had to be absolutely in sync with that. So we were conscious that we did not want to have commercial breaks that ran over a specified period of time, because the viewer at the end of the day was something that we wanted to kind of retain. We didn't want them switching, thinking, "Oh, this commercial break is too long." And one of the criticisms I have for the way television channels operate currently is because the commercial breaks go on forever, and so you lose viewers in that process. So for us, it was equally important to have the right kind of consistency of content as well as the commercial breaks as well.
Right. I must ask you, how did you decide the names and the labeling of your chapters? I mean, each of them, let me tell our viewers, I leave it to you to, of course, read the book. Let me tell them, it's very interesting. Each of the chapters starts with a quote. And some of these quotes are absolutely fantastic. I can't seem to find the one, but there is one which talks about how you hate eating peanuts, but you still can't stop eating peanuts. Same with television. So how did you decide on these quotes, which one to fit where? Because all of this fits beautifully into the book.
Well, I got to say, it's a labor of love. Okay, so I've been wanting to write this book for quite some time. I started off some while ago, and put it to rest for a while, and then got back into it. Um, and having written it, I went through the kind of motions of trying to correct it and so on, with a tremendous amount of help from our friends at Westland, who were just fantastic, Deepthi and Shweta and all of their teams, who've kind of come together and kind of embellished it at every stage. But but from the point of view of how did we get to the quotes, I've got to say, look, I had to do a fair amount of research. I wrote the chapters first, and then went back to see if I could kind of find a quote that resonated with the content, and as far as possible, and I've tried to build in a kind of contextual reference to some of those quotes wherever practical and wherever possible. So I think we've had a few changes in those as we were kind of developing the final product, and in the course of discussions, I think they've been improved as we've gone along. And somebody like Deepthi, for example, has suggested changes that I thought were absolutely valid, and so we've incorporated those into some of those quotes. The one you mentioned about I can't stop eating peanuts, or is just so relevant, because I think Orson Welles, and I think it just is so relevant today as it was whenever he said it, and whether you're watching a Star channel, or whether you're watching any of the the satellite channels, or you're watching something like Netflix and so on, I think the concept of what that quote actually kind of puts in place is still very relevant.
Absolutely. When you write a book of this nature, it's difficult to gauge or judge what you should include, what you should leave out, how much you should tell, how much you should conceal. For me, a very interesting aspect was your entire conversation around Mr. Ratikant Basu, former civil servant, high-ranking IAS officer who left the government to join Star TV, and his transition from the government to the private sector. As a journalist who's gone to ministries, I can totally relate to the red light, going on when there's a meeting happening. So these snippets are interesting, but were there times when you felt you were perhaps, there was too much that you were giving out and that you shouldn't, or was it okay?
Of course, you're absolutely right. There were times when, I think the very first version of the draft that I had done is really quite and considerably different to what is finally out there. Because what I had written and what is finally been published, there is a marked difference. It's not that I've toned anything down. I've kept pretty much the same detail, but I've kind of narrowed down and made it more focused, so that there is a sense of understanding that the reader will get to, in terms of what any senior executive in a media business might encounter when they are dealing with those kind of situations, whether you're in a government office, or you're dealing with a senior bureaucrat, or whether you're internally within your own organization having to kind of cope with certain kinds of things. You mentioned Mr. Basu, and I think Mr. Basu has been a real hero for me, because he is, I've got to say, he's just so sharp, so bright, that it's very hard to compete. And all of the officers in our bureaucracy today are exactly that. I mean, they haven't got to those positions without being, super smart, super bright, and extremely knowledgeable. The issue that I've referred to is that if I had to leave a corporate role and join the bureaucracy, it would take me a heck of a lot of adjustment, right, to be able to find my feet and settle in. And I think that exact same is true for somebody moving the other way from bureaucracy to a corporate environment, and a corporate environment that is really also quite different to a conventional corporate environment. So Star was in many ways different to many other organizations, the way we work, the speed of decision making, um, the kind of freedom that executives had to make those decisions, and so on. And so, whilst there were limitations, I think there was also a tremendous amount of freedom, which I think, when you move from a bureaucratic environment to something like that environment in the corporate world, there is a huge amount of course correction and readjustment that one needs to make. And I think that's really what I've tried to suggest.
Right. How was your experience with the news industry? You've talked about Dr. Prannoy Roy, who everybody who's a journalist looks up to. So how was your experience with the news industry then? Was it difficult to adapt? And how do you compare the kind of news we see on television now to the kind of news you created at Star TV?
Well, first of all, I didn't create any news. I was just, as I said earlier, I was the right place, right time.
Right.
But, in all of the instances with regard to news, one of the things I have to say is that we had no, as an executive, I had no role in the editorial process. And we did not, as a company, we had no role in the editorial process. So whatever went on air was something that was decided by the people that were making it. We didn't dictate or kind of coerce or anything of that sort to the editors who were looking after the business, including, and I would say, Prannoy, who was a very, he's in a way a sort of mentor of mine in many ways. He, simply would not accept, and we never really had conversations about, the editorial content. It was something we would talk about on our presentation. We would talk about length of commercial breaks. We would talk about graphics. We would talk about all those kinds of things. And, the news business then and now is obviously different because it's, I think consumption patterns are different. Largely, news is today consumed on the go, not necessarily as a sort of appointment viewing. It's not 7 o'clock news or the 9 o'clock news that one has to watch anymore, as used to be the case. And news has evolved, therefore, in terms of being able to deliver to the audience constant updates throughout the 24-hour period. So if you happen to wake up in the middle of the night or you get home late and you happen to switch on or switch off your mobile, one of the first things you tend to do, at least I tend to do, is to watch what the headlines are. And I get that on my phone. Whereas, back in the day, as I would say, I think then there was no such thing. So you had to wait till the next morning's news bulletin at 7 o'clock or whenever it started, or the 9 o'clock news at night. And, it was appointment viewing, whereas news today is not appointment viewing. And therefore, by that very nature, it has to be constantly updated for viewers to be, engaged with it.
Right. As you rightly mentioned, news has changed since then to now, but so has television. Earlier, there were shows that were weekly shows, or even if they were shows, they weren't shows that would drag on and on, unlike the current times. The bigger challenge for television right now, perhaps, is also the fact that OTT platforms have become so popular. Everybody has a smartphone. Anybody can watch, any of these Netflix, Amazon shows. Is the survival of the television industry, according to you, now in a bit of a, is that a bit of a problem for the television industry given the OTT platforms? What does the TV industry need to do to survive this out?
Well, I think I'd respond to that by saying it's not about the TV industry. And I don't believe for a second that the TV industry is, under threat at all. I think in our country, first of all, I think there are still a large number of homes that do not have a television, sadly, for whatever reason, either this, issues of affordability or whatever. So there is a certain amount of latent growth that is, going to happen in any event until we get to a point where, perhaps 99.9% homes have a TV set. I think that growth will continue. But on an aside, I think you've got to look at, we refer to it loosely as OTT platforms. The fact is they are delivering content, but in a different format. So these programs are created, by more or less the same people that were creating, programming for TV channels earlier, but they have a different kind of rule book. And the rule book has adapted itself to a changing consumer. And the changing consumer is now able to, as I said just a second ago, is able to view content any time of day or night. So we're not, the way television has changed is that there is no such thing as, what used to be called prime time. And I think that that phrase itself has vanished from everybody's vocabulary. Whereas earlier it was all about prime time, 7 to 11 at night. That's where, all the investment went in. Whereas now it's about content, and people can watch it day or night, 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, depending on their work schedules and, on their pattern of life. So I think I don't see a real threat for television as an industry at all. I think where there is a great opportunity is for people who create content to kind of be more and more innovative, and continue to push the boundaries on making sure the content is relevant and watchable. And I think that's the challenge, rather than worrying about whether the industry per se is under threat. I don't think it is.
Right. So no conversation about Star TV is complete without talking about Kaun Banega Crorepati. It's a show that everybody in India, I think, has watched at some point or the other. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? Because you've mentioned in your book that the kind of drama, the kind of excitement the show saw was not quite expected. You're not expected it.
Well, yeah, I think, first of all, I think the show has been around for almost 20 years, if not longer. And I think that's a great sign of its strength, and it's a testament to its kind of viability and its adaptability over 2 decades. And I think people's thirst for knowledge and for a question and answer kind of program, even today, despite television despite content having changed so much in other areas, whether it's music or news or sport, etc. Here's a show that has lasted its course and probably carry on for another few years as well. Look, my experience was in having anything to do with that show was I think very fortunate in that we had a fabulous anchor in Mr. Bachchan. I think we could not have made a better choice than having him. Right. And I think it helped him at that time. It helped our channel a great deal at that time, and change the dynamics of certainly our business and as well as the industry in many ways. Where I think KBC came into its own was the fact that it was produced brilliantly. It was, I don't think as a business we flinched at spending money to make the sets look great, the lighting to look fantastic, the quality of production to be, absolutely spot on. And, all of those things, they just happen to come together. And what it is, what you see today is in many ways, it is a manifestation of what was there 20 years ago, right? A few things have changed, obviously. And, but I think the viewer still loves to sit there and be challenged by, interesting questions. And whether it's a similar kind of, whether one attends a sort of quiz contest in the neighborhood and gets involved with that, or now, having quizzes online. And I think, KBC in a way sort of dramatizes that to a new level. And that's really what it is. And I promise you, I think I just happened to be the right place, right time. And it was very, very fortunate that it happened during my watch. It could have been something that happened under Mr. Basu's watch, or it could have happened under, Samir or Uday's watch. And I think I was just fortunate.
Right. Okay, I don't want to put you in a spot, but before we close, I do want to ask you, which was your favorite show on Star TV? We can start from the Santa Barbara MASH days till you were there with Star TV. So just out of all the shows that Star TV has telecast when you were there, which was your favorite?
Well, it'd be a very hard question to answer. I think they'll have a mixed bag of favorite shows, right? And I don't know, if I was to put a finger on it, I would say MASH. I think MASH was,
my parents would agree with you. It's their favorite show too.
Oh, is that right? Well, there you go. I
Yes.
had no idea. But I would say MASH for me would be something I would continue to watch even now. I would find the humor, just as appealing. And, if somebody had to, give me a kind of lottery box to put my hand in and pull out a show that I like, I just hope that I would pick out, the little paper tag which said MASH.
Right, right. Well, Mr. Mukerjea, this conversation has been absolutely fascinating. Your book, as I said, is absolutely lovely. Let me leave our viewers with a little bit of a teaser. One of the chapters begins with this quote: "Winners have parties, losers have meetings." Gary Davey. So this is what really makes the book so beautiful. It has all these little things which come together to give this entire package, this journey of RTV, and how Mr. Peter Mukerjea has managed or did manage to turn this into such a successful story. Again, thank you so much. Good luck for your book. Our viewers must pick up a copy of the book. We'll make the link available on our website as well, or as where you can go and buy the book. Thank you, Mr. Mukerjea.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to any questions that you may have or your viewers might have, and happy to answer those.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll pass them on to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.